Namaste, everyone. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about the upcoming new moon in Pushya Nakshatra, in the heart of sidereal Cancer, which is going to take place on 24th July this year. Sun and moon are going to meet in sidereal Cancer, where Mercury will be already spending quite a bit of time, and by the time Sun and Moon will meet there, Mercury will also already go into its retrograde motion. So, first and foremost, you see, what is very unique about this year and our experience of the planets, our astrological experience this year, is that Mercury is going to spend more time than usual in the sign of Cancer. And as you know, sign of Cancer is not necessarily the most optimal place for Mercury to be in, because Mercury represents our reasoning mind. You can say, in a way, Mercury represents to a huge extent left hemisphere of our brain, which is all about understanding things, predictability, structure. Also, our verbal memory. Also, the verbal side of our brain that basically just tries to make meaning out of things. And this year, Mercury is going to spend more time in here because as Mercury was entering sign of Cancer this time, he already started to slow down, preparing for his retrograde motion, which began only once Mercury entered Ashlesha. So then Mercury needs to go quite a bit backwards for the sign of Cancer and then remake this journey one more time. For all of us, it marks a time of deep emotional transformations and also deeper than usual recognition that this structured verbal side of our mind may actually not always have all the answers. Another unique thing about this moment in time is that as Mercury will be retrograde in Cancer, simultaneously Saturn will be retrograde in another watery sign of Pisces. And this will result, for many of us, for some deeper wounds, perhaps traumas, or even just bitter emotions, emotional poisons to resurface on the surface of our awareness once again, all those things where our energy perhaps got stuck or spoiled almost in some way, so that we may heal those parts of ourselves, restore them back to life, and perhaps liberate them too. And Sun and Moon meeting this month, specifically in sign of Cancer, joining the retrograde Mercury, who will be already there in Ashlesha Nakshatra, will be helping us a little bit to firstly bring more light of understanding and awareness to those parts of us that perhaps require emotional healing right now. And at the same time, of course, the meeting of Sun and Moon always accelerates certain internal processes and at the same time calls us towards allowing some shadow sides of ourselves, some outdated parts of ourselves, some parts of us that we never truly let go of, even though we really wanted. That's actually the right time to let go of them. It's actually the right time to really allow some parts of us from the past that need closure, need awareness, need a witness perhaps, to give them that and at the same time allow them to go. Because as long as we cling on to those things, it's really hard to move forward. As long as we cling to the bitterness of the past, the stuckness of the past, it's really hard sometimes to release the new life energy. It's hard to recycle, alchemically some parts of us that perhaps require recycling into something completely new. The thing is that we can't always, do this alchemical process of inner recycling until we actually allow those parts of us that really want closure and that really just want to die symbolically. We need to be able to allow them to die too. And you see, it's so incredibly symbolic because Sun and Moon, they will be meeting in Pushya Nakshatra, close to the 8th degree of Pushya Nakshatra, which is a similar degree that Saturn retrograde occupies right now in the sign of Pisces. So it will be almost like a perfect angle formed between them. Also, both Sun and Moon and also Saturn in the 20 chart or Vimshamsha divisional chart of our spiritual progress, these three planets will be dwelling in the amshas of Goddess Matangi, who literally is the goddess of, this alchemical process of recycling old energy into new energy. Goddess Matangi is known as the goddess of sacred remnants, the goddess who presides over everything that is kind of left over, but also not fully consolidated yet, not fully digested yet. As she's holding a skull, in her hand, representing something that dies, representing also our mind itself. Her very complexion is beautiful and green and vibrant. There is a life in her, a life that I believe is present in all of us, just ready to sprout out if we only allow some old parts of us to die. In the same way how if you want to speed up the process of biodegradation, you need to take this biodegradable substance and provide it optimal conditions, optimal soil, bring it back to nature. In the same way, some parts of us right now will be calling us towards bringing them back to the conditions when they can degrade more easily and be born into something new. Because life is ever-changing. Life force is always on the move. It doesn't like to be stuck in one condition. It continuously evolves. And that's also the most organic and beautiful way for our minds to function, for things and ideas and anything that we hold in our minds to continuously evolve rather than just being stuck in one place. Unfortunately, two retrograde planets who are strongly connected to our past, Saturn, and structures of our mind, Mercury, will be bringing some things from the past to our awareness right now. And our task will be, how can I take it, recycle it, and not be stuck in it at the same time, which is not always easy. But it's definitely the time for all of us to, especially this entire dark fortnight, to allow ourselves to go through this purification process and literally almost allow the divine, allow time itself, universe itself, to pour some maybe even very difficult emotions through us so that something may be cleansed within us, so that we may finally let go of those parts of us that perhaps were unnoticed and screaming silently all this time. Which is why, needless to say, it's an incredible timing actually right here, right now, for deepening of some of our sadhanas, for deepening of our internal practice, for deepening of any process of introspection and widening our self-awareness in a sense. And we will be greatly supported in that too, if we only follow that flow. After all, Sun and Moon will meet in Pushya Nakshatra, who is presided by Brihaspati. Brihas means wide, expanding. And Brihaspati, or embodied Jupiter, represents this expanded state of our mind. So we will be called during this dark fortnight to allow our mind to expand, allow our mind to hold even those things that perhaps in the past were not that comfortable to hold. So that we may not necessarily just try to desperately change everything, because most parts of us, they change on their own if we just Hold space for them without trying to change them, without trying to force them to go, but just holding space for them. That's it. After all, sign of Cancer, where Moon, Sun, and Mercury retrograde will meet at the end of this lunar fortnight, represents healing through self-compassion, healing through holding space, healing through embracing what is, even if it is embracing the poison. After all, the very Shakti or power of Ashlesha Nakshatra is the power to hold space or embrace the poison itself, to not be afraid of it. And at the same time, whenever some parts of our mind become a little poisonous, to also notice that and not let them go that direction. So it's a very alchemical time, I would say, with enormous potential for all of us to transform some things within us, some patterns within us that perhaps were incredibly hard to transform before. But needless to say, there is an emotional volatility in this process as well, especially because what will be simultaneously happening as Moon approaches the Sun, also Mars simultaneously approaches Ketu. And that adds to the volatility of this process. That is actually making everything feel more intense, that makes us feel sometimes so frustrated and overwhelmed and almost as if we are about to explode. But we are called right now to even hold space for that, for those extreme states, if need be. And at the same time, as much as Mars increases the volatility of this process, he simultaneously also gives us the courage to really meet those parts of us that need to be met with greater compassion and to not be afraid to look for new solutions. So it's a very, very powerful time. And it's also a time that, needless to say, as much, as it can help us greatly on our spiritual path, it can help us to truly transform ourselves for those of us for whom it's actually important. At the same time, it might not be the greatest time to make very important decisions, especially not impulsive decisions. It's more time to go within. And especially, it's also more the time to sometimes perhaps stay silent and wait rather than immediately react and do something about something. Every time when we choose to just wait and be a little mindful and just hold space for what is, like a vessel, literally, and just allow things to pass through, you will see that you might be able to go through them and through this process of inner transformation faster. But at the same time, the challenge will be how not to go into story making, how not to go into overanalysis, overthinking, because all of that is always a danger when Mercury is retrograde. We all tend to overuse our intellects, over-intellectualize everything, and that cuts us out, to a big degree from this transformative power of our brain, especially this right hemisphere, to change, to reshape itself into something new. So whenever your mind in this period tries making a story about something, you can just allow yourself to instead just be with the raw feeling and even ask yourself, what would be this feeling or even this entire situation without a story? Without a story that my mind tells me. Because in times like that, when there's greater intensity of feelings and emotions and our minds so desperately may sometimes try to do some meaning making, naturally, it's very, very important for us to make these conscious step backs more frequently so that we just don't get lost in thoughts and so that we don't interfere with that deep process of healing that many of us experience now on a very, very deep level. In other words, think less and feel more as much as it's possible, as much as it feels safe to you. and allow those feelings and sensations to just go through you without necessarily clinging to them, without necessarily also making big stories about it. So it's an interesting time. But the good news is that after that new moon, we all will feel some very significant shifts in life. Because after that new moon, very shortly after it, just a few days later, Mars will finally separate from Ketu. And the Kalasarpa Yoga charm in the sky, which was a reality for the last 4 months, is finally going to be broken. Which means lots of ideas will crystallize. Lots of conclusions will crystallize. And also it will become clearer to many of us what's the best next course of action. But until then, just allow yourself to feel more. Allow yourself to be in the space of not always having the answer, not always knowing what to do next. Because it's only when we get to that space of not knowing that the true voice of our intuition can actually speak. As long as you think you have all the answers, you will not even hear that tiny little voice of intuition in there. But the moment you allow yourself to go into the space of not always having all the answers, this is when intuition begins to clarify itself. So I hope you found this podcast helpful, and I wish you all a very, very beautiful new moon, because those transformative energies can be so healing to us as well. We might not always appreciate them in the moment, but once they pass through, once this wave goes, it cleans us and purifies us, and we are grateful often afterwards. The last word of advice is, as you know now that emotionally this entire period, this fortnight might be a little volatile with lots of fluctuations. Just make sure that you take care of yourself. Do not attempt even crossing your boundaries, in this time period. Take care of yourself. Hold space for yourself. Don't say yes when you feel no. Don't sacrifice too much of yourself because you might have less energy overall during this fortnight. Instead, prioritize your well-being. Frequently reconnect with those parts of yourselves, this soul inside of you, which is always unaffected by those external turbulences. Frequently reconnect with your body. Support yourself as much as you can so that this healing process doesn't feel that overwhelming, but that it starts feeling a little bit more as if you're truly riding the wave. Namaste.